Mel sat quietly in front of his PC trying to decide whether or not to load the new morphing software he just bought. Normally there wouldn't be a problem, but he just picked up the software at the new computer store in the mall, and while nothing unusual had happened inside, he couldn't shake the feeling that something was about to go very wrong. "You're letting your imagination run away with you," he mumbled to himself as he stood up and started to pace. "Just because there's some really weird shop that serves the oddest customers the world has ever seen located right next door to the computer store doesn't mean there will be any problems loading the software. Besides, loading the Morphous software was a better option than going to the mall with Larry." Sometimes he wondered why he was still friends with him. But Larry knew that Mel was hurting after breaking up with Cheryl over her pregnancy. To Larry's credit, he'd wanted to help his friend. However, checking out the babes running around the mall wasn't something he really wanted to do with Larry. In the long run, Mel's being seen hanging out anywhere with Larry would be disastrous. Around women, Larry was a condescending prick. And that was on his good days. He thought that women existed for him and his pleasures, never once considering how they might feel. As a result, most of the women in town ignored him, or at least they tried to ignore him. To make matters even worse, they were also beginning to ignore his friends. And at this time in his life, Mel didn't want to be judged guilty by association. So, instead of having to deal with any of Larry's shit, he decided to load the new Morphous software he'd bought instead. It was the safer option. Mel sat back down at his PC, then removed the CD with the new morphing software from its package and slipped it carefully into the player. As he did, a flash of lightning brightened the sky. And as the thunder accompanying it rumbled and shook the house, the power shut down. Fortunately, it was just a momentary outage, a second or two at most, but more than enough to be disruptive. Thank goodness for the surge protector, thought Mel as his PC came beeping back to life and began to reboot. But suddenly, without warning, his PC began beeping again. When he looked at the screen, he cringed as he saw the general protection fault message displayed. What now? He wondered. He'd never seen that message during a boot before and was now quite concerned that, despite the surge protector, something had been fried inside his PC. What else could go wrong? Suddenly he heard a strange crackling sound emanating from the PC's internal speakers and wished he hadn't wondered what else could happen. As he watched dumbfounded, his PC began to reboot from scratch once more. How odd, he thought. It hadn't lost power this time and he'd done absolutely nothing to make it reboot. As Windows finished booting, Mel noticed the light on the CD as it began to flash on and off as if reading the disk inside. It really shouldn't be doing that, he thought. Beginning install of Morphous version 6.6-6, copyright Aloysius, Inc., 1998 appeared in a pop-up window. And while Mel watched, his new morphing software continued to be installed without requiring additional interaction from him. It was certainly strange, he thought, as new windows continued to pop up and then disappear again. Then, finally, a window popped up and stayed on the screen long enough to be read. It announced Morphous install complete and click on Morphous icon. But, just as before, Mel didn't have to click on the icon to continue. A few moments after he finished reading it, the message was replaced by a new window that took up the left half of the screen and was labeled Start Image. At this point, the program paused. As it continued doing nothing, Mel finally decided that he had gained control of the program's execution. He pulled down the File menu and selected Load Image from the menu. Another window popped up that showed a scrollable list of his binary image files. He was very surprised to see the number of available file formats processable by this software. It looked like just about every type of image format was acceptable as input for Morphous. He scrolled down the list quickly and selected a file he knew was a picture of him. It quickly loaded into the Start Image window. Enter Identification read the window that popped up. The cursor flashed within the rectangular box inside the window. Obviously, he assumed, he was meant to type a name inside. He typed Mel and hit the Enter key. Insufficient identification. Please re-enter, said the new window. He clicked on OK and typed Mel Whitaker in the box. Then he hit the Enter key again. Incomplete identification. "Please re-enter," said the new window. Wondering just how smart this program really was, he clicked on OK and typed Melville Whitaker. Then, once again, he hit the Enter key. "Identification accepted," flashed the text in a window briefly. His name, Melville Whitaker, replaced the start image heading on the title bar. Another window appeared in the right half of the screen. It was labeled End Image. Once again, he pulled down the File menu and selected Load Image from the menu. The list of binary images window popped up again. He selected the file he wanted and it quickly loaded into the End Image window. Identify read the window that popped up. Once again, the cursor flashed within the box inside the window. He typed the name Melanie Whitaker and hit the Enter key. Accepted, flashed the text in a window briefly. Melanie Whitaker replaced the End Image heading on the title bar. Melville and Melanie had the same eye color. Their hair was also the same color, only hers was shoulder length. And they looked to be close to the same age. Those similarities had been the deciding factors in selecting Melanie's picture as the target for his first morph. He didn't know what her real name was, nor did he care. Fortunately, the program didn't seem to be as finicky about the identification supplied to the final image as it had apparently been about the initial image. Mel had been fascinated by the morphing sequence in Michael Jackson's video Black or White, and wanted to create something similar. Boys into girls. Whites into blacks. Blondes into redheads. In time, he'd do them all, but for now Melville morphing into Melanie would be the first of many morphs to follow. Another window popped up. Identify key points and key lines or auto-generate, it said. Mel clicked on auto-generate. As he watched, matching key points began to appear on each of the images. Then the points that the software determined needed to be joined together were connected by key lines. With experience, he would, in future morphs, place the key points and lines himself. He pulled down the sequence menu and clicked on Save Movie. Several minutes later, a window popped up to announce AVI complete. He clicked on OK and that window was replaced with another window. It read View Movie. Again he clicked on OK. Mel watched as his screen first blinked out, then brought up the full screen image of himself he'd used as the start image. As he continued to watch in rapt fascination, Mel watched as the image gradually and seamlessly changed before his eyes from the male Melville into the female Melanie. It had been extremely fascinating for him to watch his transformation. He thought it had looked very realistic, or at least as realistic as anyone being transformed into someone could be. He began to wonder what it would have felt like to be altered as his image had been changed. But things like that only happened in the fantasies he read, by authors who had more imagination than he could ever hope to possess. He swept his hair away from where it had fallen across his face. And as he did, he began wondering when it had had time to grow so long. Certainly, he was now in need of a haircut. Mel heard the front door open. A couple of minutes later, his father, the workaholic, finally arrived home from work. Moments later, he entered the room. In a very casual manner, he said, "Hi, sweetheart." "Hi, Dad," replied Mel, who felt totally confused by his dad's greeting. He must be working too hard, thought Mel. Why else would he call him sweetheart? "I didn't expect to find you here tonight," said his father. "I was under the impression that you and Larry had plans for tonight." Mel wondered exactly what his dad was talking about now. Larry was his best friend, but while it was true that the two of them had almost decided to invade the mall and check out all the babes that hung out there, his dad didn't know that. "Not tonight, Dad," replied Mel. "We'd thought about hanging out together at the mall tonight, but you know Larry. Besides, I bought this great new morphing program and decided to load it on my computer tonight instead." "Why didn't you wait for me to get home?" asked his father. "I know I've been working long hours the past few months, but you should know that I would have gladly taken the time to install it for you. All you have to do is ask me. You shouldn't be worrying yourself about doing those kinds of things for yourself. Did you have any problems?" "No. Of course not. Not at all," answered Mel. He wondered why his father, who was so computer illiterate that he couldn't tell the difference between a mouse and a floppy disk, was acting so weird tonight. But ever since the accident, his father acting strange was almost the norm, not the exception. Everything went perfectly, Dad. That's very good, said his smiling father. I always knew that deep down my little girl had the ability to fix her own PC and load her own software. He walked over to Mel and kissed the startled boy on his forehead. I'll see you in morning, sweetheart. And Mel, unable to speak, watched in silence as his father walked away towards his bedroom. Girl, mumbled Mel. What the hell has Dad been smoking tonight? His guilt must be acting up again. And just what did he mean by this his little girl reference? Ordinarily, Mel wouldn't bother his father when he was in one of his moods. But tonight, something seemed more wrong than usual. Deciding he needed to speak with his father, Mel stood up. For a few seconds, he wobbled on the short heels he was now wearing. What the hell? He mumbled. Wondering why he now had trouble standing, he looked down at his feet only to discover he was wearing shoes that had half-inch heels. Not only that, but he was also wearing a very short skirt. And his now bared legs were smooth and hairless like Cheryl's had been. When he straightened up again, he felt his hair fall down over his shoulders and come to rest on his breasts. Breasts? His mind shouted at him in total disbelief. Where the hell did these come from? He wondered aloud. He slowly raised his hand, a very feminine-looking hand with long nails attached to an equally feminine-looking arm, to one of his average-sized, but very noticeably female, breasts. He touched it cautiously, and was shocked to discover that, not only were they real, but these breasts were now apparently his. Still in shock, he wandered off in the direction of his room. He failed to notice that with each passing step, he walked more and more like the girl he appeared to be. By the time he reached his room, no one would have mistaken her movements as those of a boy. Hurriedly, Mel turned on the overhead light. His eyes bulged as he saw the transformation that had taken place in his room. But it wasn't his room anymore. It was obviously a room that belonged to a girl, but he knew he had no sisters. What the hell is going on here? He mumbled. I wonder when Dad had the time to do this. And why? He peered into the ornate mirror, which he'd never seen before, that stood proudly on the dresser. He couldn't help but stare at the girl reflected back from it. He raised his hand and the image of the girl responded by raising hers. He stuck out his tongue at her and, in return, she stuck out hers at him. That confirmed it. There could no longer be any doubt. Somehow, he was now a girl. By some unknown means, his dad had changed him from his son into his daughter. But why? And how? Then Mel spotted the purse sitting on dresser. Quickly opening it, he sought the identification he knew he would find inside. He found her driver's license. He stared at the picture on the license, which looked exactly like the girl reflected by the mirror. It's me, whispered Mel. But still, he wondered why she looked so familiar. He looked for her name on the license. Melanie Whitaker. A light dawned. Melanie, said Mel quietly. Now, wait 1 minute. He ran back to his PC, then stared at the picture that now filled the screen following the conclusion of the morph AVI he'd created. It was her. Or perhaps, he should have thought it was me now. But how did this happen? I morphed the picture of me into Melanie and as a result became Melanie to my dad, he marveled. It must have been this program that changed me into a girl. I definitely don't want to remain this way. But I really have to wonder just how far the effects my transformation have been felt. I know it affected Dad, because he treated me as if I'd always been Melanie, but I wonder if it affected anybody else. Mel sat back down at her computer and repeated the procedure she'd done earlier, except this time she used a picture of her father as the start image and a picture of her recently deceased mother as the end image. She watched with intense interest as the image of her father Samuel Whitaker swiftly morphed into that of her mother Helen Whitaker. If the same thing that had happened to her happened again, Mel hoped her father wouldn't be too upset if he woke up in possession of her mother's form. But she'd never had the chance to say goodbye to her mother or even tell her that she loved her before the accident took her away. And her father, who blamed himself for the accident, had buried himself in work and acted strangely ever since. Of course, it might have helped if Aunt Selina, his mother's sister, hadn't sent constant reminders to him of what had happened. Selina had never approved of her sister's marriage, but it had nothing to do with Sam Whitaker. She just didn't like men, and no man would have ever been good enough for her sister. Melville had always thought that Aunt Selina tolerated him for no other reason than he was her sister's only child. But buried deep in her subconscious, Melanie wondered if other things might also change. She walked to the door of her father's room. Very quietly, she opened it and peeked inside. Even though she'd half expected what she now saw, it was still startling to see her mother sleeping there alone. Carefully, she closed her father's, or perhaps it was now, at least temporarily, her mother's door. "This is a damned amazing piece of software," she said to herself as she walked back towards her PC. "But I suppose I'd better change this back again, before Dad wakes up and I have to try and explain to him what he's doing in Mom's body." But before Mel had time to sit back down at the PC, the doorbell rang. Who the hell can that be at this time of night, wondered Mel. She went to the door and peeked out through the little peephole before deciding it was safe to open the door. "Hey Mel," said Larry as he entered. "Larry?" replied Mel. "So who else would it be, babe?" He slipped an arm around her waist. "You weren't expecting someone else now, were you, Melanie?" "Of course not, Larry. You know, babe, you're looking really hot tonight," said Larry. "Did you forget that the two of us were going to the mall tonight?" Mel looked at Larry puzzled. "I thought we'd put that off until tomorrow night," she told him. "You know, I told you I wanted to load that new morphing software on my computer tonight." Larry looked back at her with surprise. "Just when did you become a computer geek, babe?" "I'm not a computer geek," she replied. "Whatever you say, babe," smiled Larry. The arm encircling her waist suddenly tightened. Larry pulled her closer and kissed her. Mentally, she wanted to resist his unwanted advances. And at first, so did her body. But, after a few minutes of struggling, her body betrayed her and decided that it really didn't want to resist anymore. She began to respond to Larry's caresses and kisses. "Now that's more like it, babe," he told her. "You know, it's not too late. Why don't you go get ready, and we'll go catch us a movie at the mall?" He smiled at her, then gave her a knowing little wink. "I know you'll enjoy that, but you better get ready real quick, babe, because I also know you'd hate for me to leave you behind." What an asshole, she thought. If this was the way he treated girls, it was no wonder they tried to ignore him. She stared at Larry in disgust. "Hey, come on babe. We haven't got all day, you know," said Larry in an obvious attempt to make her hurry. "You know, babe, if I was a girl, I sure wouldn't be keeping me waiting very long." Now that was the last straw, shit for brains, thought Mel. "We'll just have to see how you'd really react as a girl." She stormed off to the den and sat down in front of her computer. She pulled down the file menu and clicked on New Morph. The half-screen window labeled Start Image appeared. She pulled down the file menu and selected Load Image from it. Once again the window popped up displaying her binary image files. She scrolled down the list and, after finding the image of Larry she wanted, selected it. It quickly loaded into the Start Image window. Enter Identification read the window that popped up. In the rectangular box inside the window, she quickly typed Lawrence Mitchell and then hit the Enter key. Identification accepted flashed the text in the window that popped up briefly. The name Lawrence Mitchell replaced the Start Image heading on the title bar. The End Image window appeared in the right half of the screen. Once again, she pulled down the file menu and selected Load Image. Once more the window with the list of binary images popped up. For this image, she selected an image she had just downloaded off one of the Erotic Binaries newsgroups. It was an image that she knew Larry would lust after when he saw it. And just as quickly as before, the image loaded into the End Image window. Identify read the pop-up window. Again, the cursor flashed in the box inside. But this time, she typed the name Larissa Mitchell and hit the Enter key. Accepted, flashed the text briefly. Larissa Mitchell replaced the End Image heading on the title bar. Melanie compared the two images on the screen. Larry's hair was dark and not overly long, while Larissa's golden locks were both long and luxurious. Larry's eyes were brown, Larissa's were green. Melanie smiled as she began wondering how much Larry would enjoy being this blonde and simply ravishing buxom beauty. The key point and lines window popped up. As she had done before, she clicked on the auto-generate button, then watched as the program selected various key points on each image and joined those it determined in need of being joined with key lines. She pulled down the sequence menu and clicked on Save Movie and, as it had already done twice before, the window popped up to announce AVI complete. She clicked on OK and that window was replaced once more with another window. The one that read View Movie? Mel stood up and walked towards the door to the living room. "Oh, Larry, dear," she called out sweetly. "Could you come here for a minute?" Larry entered the room unaware that anything was amiss. He totally misread the meaning behind Melanie's enigmatic smile. "I knew you couldn't save mad at me very long, babe," he told her smugly. And, not really needing any encouragement from her, he began to nuzzle Mel's neck from behind. Successfully fighting the mounting urges of her reshaped body, she turned around and looked up at him. "Not right now, sweetheart," she told him gently. "First, there's something I really want you to see. As long as it doesn't take very long, babe." Melanie walked over to her computer. "Don't worry, babe," she told him. "It won't take long at all." She clicked on OK. As Mel silently watched on, the screen of her PC blanked out. Then it brought up the full-screen image of Larry she had supplied it as the start image. Mel was fascinated by what she saw and kept glancing back and forth between the changing image on the screen and the transforming person standing in the room in front of her. As she continued to watch in complete and utter amazement, the image on the screen gradually changed before her eyes from the male named Lawrence into the female named Larissa. Even more fascinating was observing the actual physical transformation of Larry Mitchell into Larissa. As her transformation concluded, the buxom Larissa swept her long silky blonde hair out of her eyes and whined, "Aren't we going to the mall, Melanie? I don't know what it is, but all of a sudden I feel really hot and horny. I've really got to find myself a guy real soon or I think I'm just going to explode." Shit, thought the stunned Mel. There wasn't going to be any fun in this after all. Larissa not only thought she was a girl, but she just as obviously doesn't even remember being Larry. "But why do I remember Larry?" she wondered. "Well," whined Larissa again. "Are we going or not, Melanie?" Not knowing exactly why, she replied, "Sure, why not?" But as she began wondering why she told Larissa they'd go, she quickly added, "Just let me tell my dad we're going and I'll be right back." Larissa looked at Mel with a bewildered expression. "I thought your dad died in that traffic accident a couple of months ago." Now it was Mel's turn to look surprised. "Did I say my dad? It must have been some kind of Freudian slip or something like that. You know, I obviously meant to say my mom. Anyway, Mom was asleep the last time I looked in on her. And as long as Mom stays asleep, Dad won't be able to get into any trouble," she thought. It never entered her mind that, if Larissa thought she was Larissa, her mother might think she was her mother if she woke. "Why don't we just go to the mall? I'm sure my mom won't mind." Asterisk asterisk asterisk. After Melanie and Larissa arrived at the mall, they wandered around from store to store window shopping. When she wasn't babbling about the new clothes they saw in the windows, Larissa was talking about boys. She gaped and gawked at nearly every boy that came close to them, even those in the company of their girlfriends. Larissa, just like Larry, wasn't making many female friends. And Mel was glad that their deadly stares couldn't really kill. But, strangely, after a short time had passed, Melanie, undoubtedly influenced by being around Larissa, found herself also appraising the boys around her. And, even as she did so, she was also wondering why she even looked at them in the first place. Was her mind being subtly altered the longer she stayed a girl? As two of them stood outside one of the clothing stores, a couple of boys from school approached. Melanie and Larissa recognized them instantly as Chuck Watson and Kevin Grant, two of the big defensemen on the school's championship ice hockey team. Both of them had just been named to the all-conference All-Star team. And even more importantly, especially to Larissa, neither of them was with a girl. Realizing that they'd be excellent catches, Larissa batted her eyelashes at them, which was all the added encouragement the boys needed to stop. "Hi Larissa," said Kevin, totally ignoring Melanie's presence. "Hi Kevin," cooed Larissa in response. "Would you like to join Chuck and me for a movie?" asked Kevin. "Why, I'd love to, Kevin," she replied. "Can Mel come too?" "When did you get here, Melanie?" asked Chuck shyly. "She's been here all the time, silly," replied Larissa. "It'll be just like we started out as real dates. There'll be Melanie and Chuck and me and Kevin." She eyed Kevin possessively. Both boys smiled. Chuck quietly took Melanie's hand, while Kevin, oblivious to nearly everything else around him, slid his arm around Larissa's waiting and inviting waist. Asterisk 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 asterisk. They didn't have to wait in line at the movie theater. The film they picked was a poor excuse for a grade B horror movie, but, since Chuck and Kevin, who had both seen The Bomb a couple of times before, had other things on their minds, they didn't really care if they saw any of the turkey playing up on the screen. But the movie did have one redeeming feature from their viewpoint. It was full of blood and guts and gore and lots of other things that made squeamish girls tend to hold on to them like there was no tomorrow. Both Chuck and Kevin were looking forward to Melanie and Larissa seeing them as their knights in shining armor when the blood began to run. It didn't take long for Larissa to live up, or was it down, to their expectations. She had soon gripped Kevin so tightly that other people near them in the theater wondered how he could even breathe. And in no time at all, Kevin and Larissa had become totally engrossed with one another in activities far past heavy petting. But Melanie, on the other hand, was extremely hesitant about becoming that involved with Chuck. He seemed to be a nice guy and all, but he was continually trying to get her closer to him. By the time the movie was half over, she'd only just decided to let him put his arm around her shoulder. And even that bothered her, since she was really a boy herself. And it still worried her that some of his friends might see her out with another boy. Chuck might have been upset by Mel's reticence, but he remembered an old saying his grandmother had always told him. Good things come to those who wait. So Chuck was patient. And he waited, for he truly thought of Melanie as something good. In the end, he was rewarded. Neither Melanie nor Larissa knew how the movie had ended. For that matter, neither of them knew when it had ended. But by the time the movie had ended, both girls had become totally involved with the boys they were with. It definitely posed no problem for Larissa. She really liked boys and all the attention she was getting from Kevin. But, as the house lights came on, Melanie began wondering what had gotten into her to make her do the kinds of things she'd been doing with Chuck. But, on the other hand, even she had to admit, she'd been having a lot of fun with another boy. Afterwards, the four of them wandered aimlessly around the mall for a while. It was becoming obvious to Melanie that Kevin and Larissa wanted to find some place where they could be alone. And when she looked up at Chuck, she had the sudden realization that he was probably thinking along those same lines for them. And being alone with a boy was something that she just couldn't let happen to herself. There had to be some way out of this predicament, she thought. Then Mel had an inspiration, but she wondered if the others would go along with it. I've just had an idea for some fun, she said. I just loaded this really awesome new morphing program onto my PC. With my digital camera, I can take some pictures of you guys and then use the program to morph you guys into someone totally different while you watch. But Mel, whined Larissa impatiently. Your mom's at your place. Remember? That's okay, replied Mel. She's probably still asleep. She really wanted all of them to agree. She looked at Chuck with big soulful doe eyes. So what do you think, Chuck? Just as she'd seen Larissa do to Kevin, she batted her eyelashes at her date. The feeling of power she had over Chuck amazed her. And she enjoyed every minute of being in charge. Maybe afterwards, we can do something else, she teased. Chuck looked at Kevin. And Kevin looked back at Chuck. Both of them smiled as visions of what each of them perceived as the promised something else danced through their heads. Sure. Why not? Answered both boys in unison, as Larissa frowned with growing frustration. It sounds like it could be some fun, said Chuck. It might be fun at that, thought Melanie. Melanie posed Kevin and Chuck. Meanwhile, Larissa continued to alternate between whining and pouting. She was really becoming annoying, far worse than Larry had ever been. In order to shut her up, Melanie had promised to take individual pictures of everyone before they left. The thought of having a photo of her Kevin made her happy. But Melanie wondered just how long that mood would last. After snapping the boy's picture with her digital camera, she transferred the image to her PC, where it was ready for processing by Morphus. As Kevin, Chuck, and Larissa looked over Melanie's shoulder, she pulled down the file menu and clicked on New Morph. Then after the Start Image half-screen window appeared, she pulled down the file menu again and selected Load Image from it. When the binary images list appeared, she quickly scrolled down to the image she just uploaded from her digital camera. It loaded almost instantly in the Start Image window. Enter identification. Multiple subjects require multiple valid identifications. Read the pop-up window. Simply amazing program, thought Mel. In the rectangular box within, she quickly typed Kevin Grant and Charles Watson before hitting the Enter key. Identifications accepted flashed the text in the window that appeared briefly. The label on the Start Image title bar now read Kevin Grant/Charles Watson. The End Image window loaded in the right half of the screen. Once again, she pulled down the file menu and selected Load Image. As it had done before, the list of binary images she had stored on the disk popped up. She had already decided on an image. How about having a little fun with this? She asked her companions. She clicked on the file name, which then loaded into the End Image window. What? Echoed both boys as they stared at the image of gorgeous buxom blonde twins with blue eyes clad only in the skimpiest of bikinis. You can't change them into girls, exclaimed Larissa indignantly. And why not? Asked Melanie innocently. It's not as if I'm going to be changing them in real life. After all, this is all make-believe, Larissa. She smiled. Of course, if you want, after I take that picture of you later, I can morph you into a big strong handsome hunk. Larissa paled noticeably. Oh, no. I wouldn't like that at all. Mel turned to the boys. How about you guys? She asked innocently. Do you want me to continue? Or are my big strong manly studs afraid that little old me is going to somehow rob them of their masculinity by changing this picture of you into that one with the beautiful girls? Stop it now, said Larissa worriedly. I don't like this. Come on, Larissa. This can't really hurt us, said Kevin. It's just harmless fun. It might even be kind of a kick to watch. Go ahead, Mel. Yeah, Mel, said Chuck. Go ahead. Okay, grinned Melanie in reply. The transformation is a go. The Identify pop-up window continued to wait for input. Inside the waiting box where the cursor flashed, Melanie typed the names Carrie and Cherry Whitfield and hit the Enter key. Accepted, flashed the text briefly. Carrie/Cherry Whitfield appeared in title bar replacing End Image. Please stop this, whined Larissa again. Something's not right. I can feel it. Oh, chill out, Larissa, said Kevin as he slid his arm around her. It's just a game. He looked at Chuck and smiled. Wouldn't you agree, Cherry? I certainly would, Carrie laughed Chuck in reply. Say Mel, where did the name Whitfield come from? That's the name of my next-door neighbors, Fred and Karen Whitfield, replied Melanie. They always wanted to have kids, but they never could. From all of the stories I've heard from my mother, Karen got cut up pretty bad when her dad took her to some back-alley abortionist after discovering she was pregnant as a result of being raped by a couple of guys when she was a student. She nearly bled to death. That was about 20 years ago according to my mom. The police never caught the rapists and the abortionist just vanished off the face of the earth. You know guys, now that I think about it, it seems kind of cruel to use their names for this. Come on, Mel, said Kevin. You're getting to be as bad as Larissa. You said it yourself, it's just a game. Larissa pulled away from his and went over and sat in the corner to sulk. It can't be cruel, if they don't know anything about what you're doing. I suppose you're right, said Mel. Should I continue? By all means, echoed Kevin and Chuck. When the key point and lines window popped up, she clicked once again on the auto-generate button. As the three of them watched, the program selected various matching key points on each pair of images and connected those points the algorithm determined needed to be joined with key lines. One more time, she pulled down the sequence menu and clicked on Save Movie and, after a few minutes, the window popped up to announce AVI complete. After she clicked on OK, the window that read View Movie popped up. "One last chance to save your manhood, Phyllis," said Mel with a smile. "Do I continue? Or do I stop?" Larissa said nothing. Kevin reached down and took control of the mouse from Melanie. He clicked on OK. Melanie smiled. As Mel sat entranced, the screen of her PC blanked out once more. The full-screen image of Kevin and Chuck loaded, then began to change. And as the image on the screen changed, so too did Kevin and Chuck themselves transform. Fascinating, thought Mel, who paid little attention to the movie created by her program. Instead, she stared intently as the two 6-foot-plus, 200-pound-plus defensemen from the hockey team each lost several inches in height and at least half their original body weights. Watching their muscular athletic bodies change into the exceptionally well-endowed bikini-clad female forms she'd selected for them excited her. As their transformations concluded, Larissa joined the buxom twins. "Those are really hot suits," she told them. "I wish I had bought one just like them now. I guess buying them made the trip to the mall okay, but I really find it hard to believe that not one of us was able to pick up a guy to keep us company tonight." "You got that right, Larissa," said Carrie. "For sure," replied Cherry. "And now, it's time to change me back into me," thought Mel, as she heard girlish giggling from her companions. "I should be able to have some fun with them before I change them back. But first, I need to change back to the real me." She pulled down the file menu and then clicked on Reload Previous Morph. And nothing happened. Quickly, she pulled the file menu down again and clicked on New Morph. Almost instantly, a window popped up. But Melanie cringed as she read the message, "Morphus.exe has caused general protection fault F6F6F600. What now?" she wondered. When she looked up from the screen, she was surprised to see Larissa, Carrie, and Cherry all staring at her accusingly. "What happened?" she asked them, but they didn't answer her question. They couldn't answer it. In fact, they couldn't even move. All three of them appeared to be frozen motionless in place. Then, all by itself, her PC powered down. "What have I done?" she mumbled. "You have done what it was meant for you to do, Melanie," said an odd male voice she didn't recognize. A short man entered into her view from the shadows across the room. It was almost as if he appearing out of nowhere. "Who are you?" asked Melanie fearfully. "I am many things to many people. Right now, Melanie, I am your friend." The short man smiled at her. "You may call me Morphus Aloysius Morphus. But you, like all my other friends, may call me simply Al or perhaps A, whichever makes you feel most comfortable. Have you enjoyed the use of my software, Melanie?" "Your software?" queried Mel in surprise. "Why, Morphus version 6.6.6, of course." Mel stared at the little man. "That's your software. Do you have any idea just how remarkable your software is? Do you know what it's capable of doing?" "To both questions," replied Morphus, "I must answer yes. It simply functions in the remarkable manner it was designed to function." "Have you got any idea what's wrong with my copy then?" asked Melanie. "It was working perfectly a few minutes ago. Then suddenly, it just crashed." "There is nothing wrong with your copy," smiled Morphus. "With Morphus version 6.6.6, you are allocated only 5 physical transformations affecting your reality. After using all 5, you attempted to work a 6th. It is all spelled out in the user's manual." "But I need one more," said Mel. "That is not possible," Melanie answered Morphus. "In order to affect reality, I needed to bargain with the eternal guardians of reality. 5 transformations of reality per copy was all they would allow in the bargain I struck with them. It is this bargain that allows me to create and market this software, you find so remarkable. Software is a new venture for me. I am hoping it will lighten my considerable backlog of cases that require my personal interventions and the retributions sought by others. Retributions? It is what I do, replied Morphus. For a price, anyone who believes they have been unjustly wronged by others may seek me out. If I agree with them, then I address that wrong in whatever fashion they desire as retribution. For a far greater price, that few have ever been willing to pay, I need not agree with them. In those rare cases, I need only do as they require. In either case, others may be necessarily altered as a result of the granting of the retribution required. So who was the object of this retribution gig of yours? I'll bet it was that asshole Larry Mitchell. Perhaps. Perhaps not. In any event, I may not say, answered Morphus. All of my work falls under client confidentiality. You will never know which of the 5 transformed was the target of my client. Nor will you ever know who my client was. And I have already been paid for my services, which is all that ever concerns me. Are you saying that any of the people I transformed could have been the target of your retribution? I can neither confirm nor deny that statement, replied Morphus. For truly any, all, or none of those you have transformed may have been subject to my retribution. Indeed, without fear of comprising my client or clients, I shall reveal to you now that all 5 people you transformed had complaints filed against them, but not all of them merited a response from me. But I never did anything to deserve this, said Melanie. Didn't you? Replied Morphus. What about Cheryl? What about her? I loved her, but then she told me the baby wasn't mine. How could I trust her after that? You should have tried. For she was testing you, said Morphus. It was poor test to be sure, but all the same you failed. The baby was yours and had been yours all along, just as it shall always be yours. But she wouldn't have done that to us, said Mel. When I become me again, I'll talk things out with her. You'll see. Now, Morphus, how do I get back to being me? Asked Mel. I don't want to remain Melanie forever. I want to be me. You need not worry about that, Mel. When the morning comes, you will be normal again, said Morphus. I have already taken care of that particular problem for you. As always, the Eternal Guardians have been exceptionally amiable with what I ask of them. All you need do now is wake up tomorrow morning. But what about the others? Yawned Mel. What once was is no longer important. I will tell you things now that tomorrow you will know to have been always true. Karen Murphy, now Karen Whitfield, was never raped. She never needed to see that back alley abortionist, and, as a result, she and Fred became parents of twin girls. If they knew, I'm sure they would thank you for Carrie and Cherry. All involved with that case have faced my retribution. Sometimes the sins of the fathers must be passed on to the sons. And where guilt, where there was no need of guilt, existed, there is no longer guilt. Mel yawned widely. She was suddenly very sleepy. Perhaps I have said too much. I did not wish to bore to you, said the short man. It is time that you should get some sleep, Mel. You look awfully tired to me, said Morphus with a smile. I will send these 3 home for you. And in the future, you will all remain good friends. As he passed his hand over the still motionless forms of Larissa, Carrie, and Cherry, each of them in her turn vanished with a barely audible pop as the air rushed in to fill the vacated space. Morphus began walking back toward the shadows. He turned. Good night, Melanie. Sleep well, he said before he disappeared back into the shadows. Mel yawned again as she made her way to her bedroom. Another yawn. And before long, she was in her bed and fast asleep. As the sun rose, the light of the dawning day streamed into the room through the undraped windows. The heat from its rays woke the sleeping Mel. Remembering what Morphus had said last night, Mel quickly glanced around the room. Everything seemed to be totally normal again. All appeared exactly as Mel remembered that it should. Mel, who had been worried about the ability of Morphus to really fix things and make them normal again, sighed with great relief. Morphus had come through. Things seemed to be normal, but there was one final test needed. Very nervously, Mel tossed back the blankets and got out of bed, then walked slowly over to the mirror standing on the dresser. Mel looked in the mirror and smiled. The reflected image smiled back. I'm me again. Not somebody else, but really me. Mel began to laugh. Morphus really did come through after all. There was a knock on the bedroom door. Yes, said Mel happily. Are you all right? Asked Mel's mother as she entered the room. I've been a little worried about you lately. I'm just fine, Mom, replied Mel. You really don't have to worry about me. I had this really strange dream last night. And in it, I dreamed Larissa, Carrie, Cherry, and I weren't really who we were, but completely different people. But then, we were all rescued by the little guy named. Geez, that's funny, I can't seem to remember his name. It'll probably come to me later. But he told me that everything would be back to normal in the morning, and it is. So, you see, there's nothing to worry about. But I'm your mother, dear. And it's definitely part of a mother's job description to worry about her only daughter, especially when she's soon to become a mother herself. I know that, Mom, replied Melanie. But believe me, everything's perfectly normal. Wouldn't I be the first to know if there was something wrong?